She could predict everything, markets, behavior, even chaos. But there's one thing she never calculated: love. And when she hired a man to teach her what affection feels like, she didn't know that lesson would change her life forever. Stella Lane lived her life by data: neat, logical, predictable. Her mornings began at exactly 6:30 a.m. Her oatmeal contained precisely 40 grams of oats. Her commute took 32 minutes, and unless it rained, she was brilliant in econometrician who built models that predicted consumer behavior with uncanny accuracy. But no algorithm could predict people, and that was where her world always fractured. At 30, Stella had everything she thought she wanted: a job she excelled at, a sleek apartment, and silence, the kind she could control. But at night, when she sat by the wide window overlooking San Francisco's glowing skyline, she couldn't help but feel like the only person who hadn't cracked the code to happiness. Her mother called it concern, her friends called it focus, Stella called it loneliness, though she would never admit that out loud. So one evening, after a company gala that left her awkwardly dodging small talk and champagne, she found herself scrolling through her laptop, typing words she'd never imagined she'd search. Professional escort services, Bay Area. Her pulse raced. This wasn't about lust. It was about learning. Relationships, intimacy, affection. They all had a pattern, didn't they? Something she could study, understand, maybe even master. And that's when she saw him, Michael Fan. Tall, striking eyes like the calm before a storm. His profile said he was confident, discreet, and specialized in teaching emotional connection through experience. Her fingers trembled as she read it again. She told herself it was research, a controlled experiment. When she clicked book session, her heart skipped a beat, as if a long silent part of her had just woken up. The next morning, she tried to bury the thought beneath spreadsheets and code, but every cell in her brain kept returning to one variable she couldn't quantify. What would it feel like to be wanted, not because she was smart, but because she was her? And for the first time, Stella realized her equations were missing something that couldn't be calculated: human touch. The restaurant glowed with low golden light, the kind that made everything and everyone look softer, safer. Stella had arrived 10 minutes early. She sat at a corner table, fingers clenched around a glass of water that trembled slightly with every heartbeat. She had replayed this moment 1,000 times in her mind: what she'd say, how she'd smile, how she'd pretend to be comfortable. But when the door opened and Michael walked in, every carefully rehearsed line vanished. He was different from his photos, more real, the kind of handsome that wasn't polished. It was warm, disarming. A black button-up shirt, sleeves rolled casually, dark hair that fell just right over his forehead. But it was his eyes, deep, kind, quietly observant, that made her forget to breathe. He scanned the room once, then saw her. For a moment, time paused, and then he smiled in slow, deliberate, like he already knew she was nervous and didn't mind. "Stella?" he asked, his voice smooth, calm. She nodded quickly, almost too quickly. "Yes, hi, you're Michael." He slid into the seat across from her, setting down his phone and meeting her gaze, with that easy confidence that made her pulse skip. "Just Michael's fine," he said softly. "You don't have to be nervous." "I'm not nervous," she lied, her voice a little too sharp. Then she grimaced. "That was unconvincing, wasn't it?" Michael chuckled. "Just a little." Something about his laughter eased her shoulders. It wasn't mocking, and it was gentle. "So," he said, leaning back, "you booked a session. Most people don't meet for dinner first. Why me?" Her eyes darted down to the tablecloth. "I'm different. I like to understand things before I do them. I thought we could discuss terms and expectations logically." He tilted his head, intrigued. "Logically?" She nodded, fumbling with her bag. "Yes, I made a list." When she handed him a printed document, Michael blinked and then laughed, unable to help it. "You really made a list?" "Of course," she said seriously. "Relationships are like any system. There are steps, variables, outcomes." He smiled, folding the paper neatly. "All right. Then I guess I'll follow your rules, Miss Lane." Her name sounded different when he said it. Softer, almost tender. As dinner went on, conversation slipped past numbers and logic into stories and small details. The kind Stella rarely shared. Michael listened. Really listened. Every time she stumbled over a word, he waited, not filling the silence with judgment. By dessert, something shifted. He leaned forward slightly, his voice lower now. "You don't need a list, Stella. You just need someone who sees you. Her breath caught. And do you? He smiled faintly, eyes holding hers. Ask me again after lesson 1. He smiled. Then that's lesson 1. Trust the moment, not the math. She smiled back, shy but genuine. And for the first time, Stella realized that learning intimacy wasn't a calculation. It was chaos as beautiful, terrifying chaos. And she was finally letting herself feel it. Stella had never been in a stranger's apartment before, at least. Not like this. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood and laundry detergent. Clean, warm, masculine. Michael's home was simple but inviting. Shelves stacked with worn paperbacks. A plant by the window. A guitar leaning against the couch. She stood near the door clutching her bag, eyes darting everywhere but him. Relax, Michael said gently, setting down 2 glasses of wine. You're safe here. I know, she said quickly, though her voice betrayed her. I just don't do this kind of thing. He smiled, that slow, reassuring grin that seemed to soften every nerve in her body. That's why I'm here, remember? To help you not overthink it. She gave a nervous laugh. That's impossible. Then we'll start small. Michael sat on the couch, patting the space beside him. Stella hesitated, counting the seconds in her mind like data points. 1, 2, 3. Then she moved. Cautiously, and sat just far enough to be polite. He noticed, of course. You can sit closer, he teased lightly. I don't bite unless asked. Her cheeks flamed scarlet. That's not funny. Sorry, he chuckled softly. Bad joke. The silence stretched. Outside, the rain tapped softly on the window. Inside, the tension built like a string pulled too tight. Michael turned toward her, lowering his voice. Okay, he said. Lesson 1 isn't about kissing or touching. It's about comfort. About learning to be present with someone. Comfort, she repeated. I can do that. Good, he said. Then start by looking at me. She did, hesitantly at first, then longer. His eyes were darker up close, calm and steady. They didn't dart away like other people's did when she fidgeted or spoke too fast. Now breathe, he whispered. Don't analyze it. Just be here. Her breath came shallow, uneven. He smiled faintly. You're thinking again. I can't help it, she admitted, voice trembling. I keep calculating what to say, how long to look, what's normal. Stop trying to be normal, he said softly. You're fine the way you are. The words landed like a heartbeat in her chest. Nobody had ever said that to her before, not without conditions. Not without a polite correction afterward. Her lips parted. You mean that? I don't say things I don't mean. The quiet between them grew heavy again. This time not awkward but alive, full of something neither could name yet. Then he reached out, brushing his fingers gently across her wrist. See, he murmured. No pressure, just contact. Her pulse leapt. It wasn't the touch, it was the gentleness, the patience. She didn't pull away. Better, he asked. She nodded, voice barely a whisper. A little, he smiled. Then that's lesson 1. Trust the moment, not the math. She smiled back, shy but genuine. And for the first time, Stella realized that learning intimacy wasn't a calculation. It was chaos as beautiful. Terrifying chaos, and she was finally letting herself feel it. For days after that first lesson, Stella couldn't stop replaying every detail. The quiet tone of his voice, the steadiness of his hand, the way the room seemed to shrink around them, until all she could hear was her own heartbeat. She told herself it was data, that she was simply reviewing what she'd learned. But data didn't make your stomach flutter or your chest ache when you realized you missed someone's smile. By the time she arrived for their next session, she was so nervous she nearly dropped her purse. Michael opened the door, smiling that same soft smile. You came back. I said I would, she said, stepping inside. You're punctual, he chuckled. I take my job seriously. That word job landed heavier than it should have. For him, this was business, a favor wrapped in professionalism. For her, she wasn't so sure anymore. Same lesson? She asked quickly. He shook his head. No, tonight we talk about rules. Rules? Yeah, every relationship has them, written or not. You have yours, I have mine. He poured her tea instead of wine this time. It was small, but it made her notice. He was paying attention to her boundaries. So, he said, sitting across from her, tell me what feels off limits to you. She hesitated. People touching my hair, or my face, and surprises. I don't like surprises. He nodded. Got it. Then his eyes softened. Now I'll tell you mine. She looked up. You have rules too? Everyone does, he said quietly. Mine is I don't get attached. The words lingered in the air like smoke. Something about the way he said it made her chest tighten. That sounds lonely. He smiled faintly. It keeps things simple. But people aren't simple, she said. Not really. Exactly, he murmured. That's why rules help. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of rain against the windows filling the space between their words. Stella studied him, the small scar on his jaw, the way his fingers drummed against the mug when he was thinking. For someone who claimed not to get attached, he seemed like a man full of hidden stories. Can I ask something? She said softly. Anything. Do you ever break your own rules? His eyes lifted, meeting hers, intense, unreadable. Only when someone makes it hard not to. Her breath caught. She wanted to look away but couldn't. Then, as if realizing he'd said too much, Michael stood and walked toward the window. Let's
move on to lesson 2.
But Stella already knew something had shifted. Quietly. Dangerously. There were rules between them, yes, but the heart had its own set of rules, unwritten, unstoppable and impossible to control, and deep down, she knew both of them were already breaking them. Stella had always believed that emotions were variables you could predict, that if you followed logic, outcomes would stay in control, but nothing about tonight felt controlled. Michael was quieter than usual. There was something in his expression, a weight, maybe guilt, that she couldn't read. He set the music low, something soft and wordless, then said, "We don't have to continue if you don't want to." She hesitated. "Do you want to?" His answer came too quickly. Yes, but that's not the point. They both knew what this was supposed to be. Practice. Teaching her about comfort, confidence, affection. But now, every second spent together only blurred the line between what was real and what was pretend. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, carefully, like he was afraid she'd pull away. She didn't. "I shouldn't," he murmured, his thumb trembling slightly. "You make it hard to remember this is a job." Her voice broke the silence. Then stop thinking of it as one. The word surprised even her. She wasn't supposed to want this, but being with him didn't feel like a transaction. It felt like breathing for the first time. Their eyes met and the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, for the briefest moment, his restraint cracked. He leaned in, his lips brushing hers, a whisper more than a kiss. It was hesitant, careful, like a secret neither was ready to admit. When he finally pulled away, his voice was hoarse. "That and was a mistake." She blinked. "Why?" "Because if I let myself want this," he said quietly, "I won't stop." He turned his back, running a hand through his hair. Every inch of him screamed conflict. The man who wanted her, and the man who believed he shouldn't. Stella stood there, trembling. For the first time in her life, logic couldn't save her. She didn't know how to unfeel something that felt so painfully right. "I don't think it was a mistake," she said finally. Michael looked over his shoulder, his expression raw. "Then you don't understand what it'll cost us." The rain outside had stopped, but the silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Neither spoke again that night. When she left, his cologne lingered on her skin like a memory she couldn't wash away. And as she sat in her car, staring into the dark, Stella realized something terrifying. She had fallen for a man who was never supposed to be part of her equation. Days passed, but every minute felt like an echo of that night. The mistake, the kiss, the silence that followed. Stella told herself to move on. She immersed herself in data models, late-night spreadsheets, and the false comfort of numbers that always behaved as expected. But her thoughts refused to cooperate. No matter how hard she worked, she couldn't remove the variable named Michael from her mind. He too had disappeared. No texts, no calls, no quiet laughter over takeout. Only absence. And yet every morning when she poured her coffee, she still found herself pouring 2 cups before realizing he wasn't there. At first she thought he was avoiding her because she'd crossed a line. Maybe she'd made him uncomfortable. Maybe she'd ruined the delicate balance they had. But when she went to his studio one evening, she learned the truth, and it cut deeper than rejection. Michael was there, folding fabric behind the counter. When he saw her, his smile faltered. "Stella, you shouldn't be here." She froze. "I just wanted to talk." He exhaled, setting down the silk he was holding. "It's better if you don't." "Why, because you kissed me?" "No," he said quietly. "Because I wanted to." The air grew heavy. He wouldn't look at her. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Then why are you pretending you don't care?" Because caring doesn't fix anything, Stella. He met her gaze at last, his eyes filled with regret and something deeper, unspoken. I have things in my life you don't understand. Family, debt, responsibility. You deserve someone who can give you everything. I can't. But I didn't ask for everything, she whispered. I just wanted you. He flinched as if her words burned. For a long moment, neither moved. Then he said softly, "Sometimes love isn't enough." And with that, he turned away again. When she left the studio, her vision blurred through tears. The city lights shimmered like broken glass, and the world felt colder than before. Back in her apartment, she deleted his number, then undeleted it 5 minutes later. She hated herself for missing him, but even more for loving someone who didn't think he was worth love. That night, Stella lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time, she realized that equations couldn't measure pain. Love wasn't data. It was chaos, beautiful, unpredictable, and utterly human. And though Michael had walked away, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't done fighting for him yet. Rain had returned to San Francisco heavy, relentless, soaking the streets like the city itself was grieving. For Stella, the sound had become familiar. It echoed her heart, constant, aching, unending. It had been 3 weeks since Michael walked away. 3 weeks of pretending she was fine. 3 weeks of missing him like he was oxygen. But love, she realized, wasn't something you could file away like a bad memory. It lived in the quiet moments, in her morning coffee, in the empty space beside her pillow, in the silence that followed every thought of him. Tonight she couldn't take it anymore. Drenched, shivering, she stood outside his apartment door. Her umbrella had snapped in the wind halfway here, but she didn't care. Her heart was louder than the storm. When he opened the door, he froze. "Stella?" She looked at him, exhausted, trembling, but fierce. "You don't get to decide for both of us." He stepped back, stunned. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about us." Her voice cracked. "You think I don't understand your world, your struggles, your fears? Maybe I don't, but I want to. You think I deserve someone better? I don't. I deserve someone real." Michael stared at her, rain dripping from her hair onto his floor. "You don't know what you're asking for." "Yes, I do," she said, her voice steady now. "I'm asking for you, not the escort, not the man who keeps pushing me away. You." He looked away, his jaw tight. "I can't give you the life you deserve." "Then we'll build one together," she whispered. For a moment, silence filled the air. Heavy, electric, almost unbearable. Then, without another word, Michael closed the distance between them and kissed her, like a man finally surrendering to gravity. It wasn't perfect, and it was raw, desperate, real. Every emotion they had buried came rushing out. Fear, desire, longing, love. When they finally broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "I've been so afraid of ruining you," he said softly. She smiled through tears. "Then don't ruin me, love me." He laughed, a sound she hadn't realized she'd missed so much. "You really think love's the answer to everything?" "For once," she said. "I don't need data to prove it." Outside, the rain softened into mist. Inside, two broken people finally stopped running from what they were always meant to find. Each other. Because love, Stella realized, wasn't about perfection. It was about choice. And tonight they both chose to stay.